In the last video, we found domain by looking at the formula for a function. Now we're going to figure it out by looking at the graph. And it turns out that the graph is the best way to figure out the range of a function as well. All right, so let's take a look at this function. We're going to state the domain and range in interval notation. Remember that the domain is referring to the x values that you can plug into the function and get a y value for. So you can do this visually. So for example, like x equals -2 here. I know that this is in the domain of the function because I can go up here and get a y value, so maybe 2.75. So that x coordinate has a y coordinate. So -2 is in the domain. So basically anything on the x-axis that I see here is going to be in the domain, except for the bit that's off to the left after -4. Like -4.5 is not in this function because I can't go up or down and find a function value there. Right. So basically, let me clean off this graph and then we'll shade in on the x-axis what our domain is. Okay, so I can plug in -4, I would get 0. And then anything to the right here would be in the domain. The fact that the graph goes to the edge of the graph paper, remember off to the right, means that this function goes on forever in that direction. So that means that I can say the rest of the x-axis is going to be covered by this graph as it goes on towards infinity. All right, so my domain, I'm going to write in interval notation. That's going to be on the left-hand side, -4. I'm going to put a bracket on -4 because it's included. It's got that filled in dot. And then it goes all the way to forever. So we go to infinity, always putting a parentheses on infinity. To find the range of the function, we're going to do the same thing looking at the y-axis instead of at the x-axis. You could turn your head to the left 90 degrees, or you could rotate your paper just so that to your eyes, it looks like the negative y-axis is on the left-hand side and the positive y-axis is on the right-hand side. So looking at the y-axis, we're going to try to figure out what y values are associated with x values on this function. So I could think y equals 3 is in the range of this function because it's given as an answer for some x coordinate over here, -1 point something, right? So a number that wouldn't be in the range would be down here at like -0.7 or something like that. There is no function associated with that y coordinate. So again, looking at the y-axis, the values that are associated with the function are from y equals 0 and on up. And it looks like because this graph goes off the edge of the paper that it's going to keep going up and up and up. All right, so we would say that our range, again, we're going to go left to right with the negative y-axis on your left-hand side, is from 0 to infinity. And I'm putting that in bracket at 0 because we did use a y coordinate of 0 at that point, -4, 0. Let's try this one more time with this function here. We're going to state the domain and range in interval notation. Again, with the x-axis, we want to just say, starting off at the left, where do we start getting x coordinates that have y coordinates associated with them? Right. And the first place that we start seeing anything happening is at -3. We don't actually have a y coordinate at -3. We have this sort of phantom point there. Right. But everything after -3 has graph above or below it until we get over here to this right-hand point. And it looks like that right-hand point's right at 2.5. So I'm going to say that's where my domain ends. After I get to 2.5, there's no more graph, no more x coordinates have graph associated with them. So I'm going to say that the domain of this function goes from -3 to +2.5. And let's see, I want to put a parenthesis on -3 because we don't actually have a y coordinate there at -3, but we do at 2.5. So I'm going to put a bracket on that one. All right, calculating the range, we're going to do the same thing, just looking at the y-axis. So again, if it helps you to turn your head or turn your paper so that the negative y-axis is on the left and the positive y-axis is on the right, you can do that. Again, we're looking for what's the lowest y coordinate that shows up on this function. And the lowest y coordinate I see is here at -1. And we actually use that y coordinate over there at 2.5. And then I've got graph going up and let's see, I kind of want to pause at x equals 0 because I know over there on the left, I've got that hole in the graph, but notice that x equals 0 does get used in this function here at x equals 1. So I do want to include that in my range. And I keep using y coordinates until I get here to y equals 2. It looks like that y equals 2 gets used at like -1.3 or something like that. Okay, so it looks like that y coordinate does get used. But after that, I don't have any more graph above 2. Right, so the only y coordinates I use in this function are between -1 and +2, and that's going to be our range. Right, from -1 to +2, including both of them. So we're going to put brackets on both of those numbers. All right, so that's it for finding domain and range from a graph, and we'll pick up with section 1.3 the next time I see you on Zoom.